He wasn't barking at the tree. He was begging someone inside not to disappear. The wind moves first, slow and dry, brushing through the tall gums like a whisper that doesn't want to be heard. And beneath that quiet, something breaks the rhythm. A bark, sharp, insistent, cutting through the stillness of the bushland just outside Wagga Wagga, where the earth smells of dust and old rain and forgotten tracks. Rex doesn't stop. Not for a second. His voice carries across the clearing, echoing against trunks that have stood longer than memory. And it isn't the kind of bark that calls for play or warning. It's deeper, almost strained, like each sound is pulled from somewhere heavier than instinct. Ethan Calloway slows his step, boots pressing into the dry soil with a faint crunch, his breath steady, measured, the kind that comes from years of discipline that never really leave a man, not even after the uniform is gone. He watches the dog, head tilted slightly, eyes narrowing just enough to notice what others would miss. Rex isn't pacing. He isn't scanning. He's fixed, locked onto a single point at the base of a thick, misshapen tree, a lump of timber that bulges unnaturally, like something once broken and poorly healed. "Easy, mate," Ethan mutters under his breath, though the words don't carry authority this time, only curiosity. Rex doesn't respond, not even a flick of the ear. The dog steps closer, nose brushing against the bark, then pulls back and lets out another bark, sharper, edged with urgency, followed by a low whine that lingers in the air longer than it should. Around them, the bush holds its breath. No birds, no rustle of small life in the undergrowth. Just that sound, repeating, pressing, insisting. Ethan shifts his weight, glancing briefly over his shoulder where the track disappears into the trees, then back again. He's seen dogs alert before. He's worked alongside them, trusted them in places where a single mistake meant you didn't come home. But this feels different. Rex isn't reacting to scent alone. There's something else in the way his body leans forward, tense but not aggressive, like he's trying to reach something just out of sight. The sunlight filters through the canopy in thin, uneven lines, catching on the rough bark of the tree and revealing faint scars along its surface, old cuts that don't belong to nature, lines too straight, too deliberate, as if someone had once tried to open it and then changed their mind. Ethan steps closer, slow, deliberate, every movement measured, and as he reaches the tree, he pauses, just for a second, placing his hand lightly against the trunk. It's warmer than it should be. Not hot, not unnatural, but enough to make him notice. Rex lets out a soft, almost pleading sound, pressing his head briefly against Ethan's leg before turning back to the tree, paw lifting, scraping lightly at the base. Not digging wildly. Not yet. Just enough to say here. Ethan exhales slowly, his gaze softening for a fraction of a second as his eyes drift to the tattoo along his right forearm, the outline of a shepherd inked years ago, a reminder etched into skin because memory alone wasn't enough. "You're not letting this go, are you?" He murmurs, more to himself than the dog. Rex answers with another bark, shorter this time, almost restrained, as if he knows the moment is changing. The wind shifts again, carrying with it a faint scent, something buried beneath the usual mix of eucalyptus and dry earth, something harder to name, something that doesn't belong out here. Ethan leans in slightly, listening, not just with his ears, but with that quiet part of himself that had kept him alive more than once. And for a brief second, so faint it could be dismissed as imagination, there's a sound. Not a voice, not a cry, just a soft, irregular tap, like something small meeting wood from the other side, hesitant, uncertain, but there. Rex freezes, ears forward, body still as stone. Ethan doesn't move. Not yet. The bush remains silent, holding the moment between them, waiting to see what he'll choose. And for the first time since the barking started, Ethan Calloway feels it, that shift from routine into something else entirely, something that doesn't ask permission, something that simply arrives and demands to be seen. The sound comes again, faint but stubborn, not loud enough to belong to the open bush, not clear enough to trust without doubt, and yet it sits there between each breath like a question that refuses to fade, a soft, uneven tapping that carries through the timber and settles somewhere behind Ethan's ribs where instinct begins to outweigh reason. He does not move immediately. Years of training have taught him that the first reaction is rarely the right one, that patience reveals what urgency can hide, But Rex does not have that patience now. The dog shifts his weight, paws pressing harder into the dirt, claws scraping a shallow arc at the base of the tree. And this time there is no hesitation in the movement, no uncertainty, just a quiet insistence that grows stronger with every second. "All right," Ethan murmurs, the words low and steady, more a promise than a command, and he crouches beside the trunk, bringing himself level with the place Rex refuses to leave. Up close, the bark tells a different story. It is not just old damage or weathered age. The grain is disrupted, lines running in directions they should not, edges too clean to be the work of time alone. And when Ethan presses his palm flat against it again, he feels it more clearly now, a subtle give beneath the surface, like hollow space hidden behind a thin wall. Rex lets out a short, sharp bark, then stills completely, ears forward, eyes fixed on Ethan as if waiting for him to catch up to something already understood. "You heard it too, did you?" Ethan says quietly, though he knows the answer before the words leave him. The wind shifts again, brushing across the clearing, and with it comes that same faint scent, not strong enough to name but enough to unsettle, something that does not belong to open air or living ground, something contained. Ethan glances once toward the track behind them, measuring distance without thinking, the way he always does, counting steps, time, options, then back to the tree. There is no immediate danger, no sign of movement beyond the bark, no sound now but the wind and the soft rhythm of Rex's breathing. And yet, leaving feels wrong in a way that is difficult to explain, like walking away from a door that has already begun to open. He reaches for the small folding tool clipped to his belt, fingers moving with quiet familiarity, not hurried, not uncertain, and as the metal edge catches the light, Rex leans forward, not aggressively, not anxiously, but with a focus so intense it almost feels like reverence. "Easy," Ethan says again, softer this time, and he places the edge gently against the bark, not cutting yet, just testing, tracing the line where the wood feels weakest. The first movement is careful, controlled, a slight pressure that lifts a thin strip of outer bark away, revealing a lighter layer beneath, and as it peels back, the air changes, just slightly, enough for Ethan to notice. It is cooler there, held, as if the tree has been keeping something inside, something separate from the heat of the day. Rex exhales sharply, a sound that is almost relief, and then lowers his head, pressing his nose close to the opening, but he does not push further. He waits. Ethan continues, slow and methodical, widening the opening by a few centimeters at a time, each movement deliberate, each pause longer than the last, listening, always listening. And then it comes again. Not imagined this time. Not distant. A soft, uneven tap, followed by something like a faint scrape, as if something inside has shifted, uncertain but aware. Ethan freezes, the tool held still in his hand, his breath caught halfway between inhale and exhale. Rex does not bark now. He does not move. The entire bush seems to fall silent around them, as if even the wind has stepped back to watch. Ethan leans closer, bringing his ear near the opening, eyes narrowing, every sense focused on that narrow space where wood meets air. And there it is, clearer now, a small, deliberate sound from within, not loud, not desperate, but present, undeniably present. For a moment, time stretches, thinning into something fragile, and in that space, Ethan feels the shift completely, the moment where uncertainty becomes decision. He does not question it. He does not step back. Instead, he adjusts his grip, steadies his hand, and begins to open the tree with more purpose now, still careful, still controlled, but no longer tentative. Rex inches closer, body low, tail still, every part of him aligned with what is about to be revealed, and as the opening widens just enough to let a thin blade of sunlight slip inside, something changes in the sound, a pause, then a faint response, like something within has noticed the light. Ethan exhales slowly, almost without realizing it, and for the first time since the barking began, there is a quiet certainty in his chest, not of what they will find, but of one thing alone. They were meant to stop here. The opening is wide enough now for light to slip inside and not return the same way it entered, as if the hollow within the tree absorbs it, softens it, reshapes it into something dim and guarded, and Ethan pauses again, not out of hesitation, but out of respect for the moment that is unfolding, the kind that does not come often and never arrives twice in the same form. Rex lowers himself slowly onto his front legs, body still, head slightly tilted, ears locked forward, listening not just for sound but for meaning. And there is a quiet shift in him now, less urgency, more focus, as if the frantic edge has given way to something steadier, something certain. Ethan moves his hand forward, fingers brushing the inner edge of the opening, feeling the texture change from rough bark to something smoother, almost shaped. And that alone is enough to confirm what he already suspects. This is not natural, not entirely, not something the bush has grown on its own. He leans in closer, eyes adjusting to the dimness inside, and for a moment there is nothing but shadow, a shallow darkness that hides more than it reveals, and then it moves. Not fast, not sudden, just a slight shift, a change in the pattern of light and shadow, followed by a faint, careful sound, like breath meeting wood. Ethan stills completely. His voice, when it comes, is softer than before, stripped of command, carrying only reassurance. Hey, easy now. The words hang in the air, simple, steady, the way he once spoke in places where calm was the only thing keeping everything from tipping the wrong way. Rex does not bark. He does not whine. He watches. The kind of watching that does not miss anything. Ethan widens the opening another few centimeters, careful not to rush, careful not to break more than necessary. And as the light reaches deeper inside, the shape becomes clearer, not sharp, not fully formed, but enough to understand. There is space within the tree, more than expected, a hollow carved deliberately, its inner walls smoothed in places where time alone could not have done the work, and within that space, something rests. Something small, something still. The sound comes again, softer now, a faint exhale followed by a slight movement, and Ethan feels the tension in his chest ease just enough to let him breathe properly again. It is not silence inside. It is presence. He shifts his weight forward, one knee pressing into the dirt, bringing himself closer to the opening, and this time when he looks in, he sees it. A small figure, curled tightly within the hollow, wrapped in layers that blend with the wood, as if whoever placed it there had intended it to disappear into the tree itself. The shape does not move much, only a subtle rise and fall that marks each breath, and a hand, small and unsteady, rests against the inner wall where the tapping had come from, fingers brushing lightly against the timber as if testing whether the world outside is real. Ethan's breath leaves him in a slow, controlled exhale, not relief, not yet, but recognition of something far more fragile than he had expected. Rex inches forward, nose lowering to the opening, and this time Ethan does not stop him. The dog leans in just enough for his breath to reach inside, warm and steady, and for a brief second, the movement within pauses, then shifts slightly toward it, as if recognizing something familiar in the scent, something safe. "You are all right," Ethan says quietly, the words chosen with care, each one placed gently into the space between them. "We have got you." There is no response in words, only that same faint movement, a slight adjustment of position, a small hand lifting just enough to touch the edge of the opening before retreating again, not in fear, but in caution. The bush remains silent around them, holding the moment, and Ethan reaches forward slowly, not entering the hollow yet, not forcing contact, just placing his hand near the opening, palm open, steady, offering presence without demand. Rex stays beside him, unwavering, his earlier urgency transformed into something else entirely, a quiet guardianship that fills the space with a kind of calm that cannot be taught. Ethan glances briefly at the markings inside the tree, the careful shaping, the way the hollow has been constructed, and a thought passes through him, not fully formed, not yet understood, but heavy with implication. This was made. This was planned. And whatever had been left inside was not meant to be found easily. He returns his focus to the opening, to the small movement within, and lowers his voice even further, almost a whisper now, as if speaking too loudly might break something delicate. "You are not alone anymore." The words settle into the hollow, carried by breath and warmth, and for a moment, nothing changes, and then, slowly, carefully, the small hand reaches out again, this time a little further, fingers brushing against the edge of the light where Ethan's hand waits, hesitant but willing, and in that quiet, fragile contact, something shifts, not in the bush, not in the air, but in the space between them, where fear begins to loosen its hold, and something else, something quieter, begins to take its place. The contact is light, almost uncertain, but it is there, the smallest bridge between two worlds that should never have met like this. A warm human hand resting just outside the hollow, and a smaller one reaching from within, trembling not from fear alone, but from the long quiet of being unseen. And Ethan does not move too quickly, does not close the distance all at once, because he knows some moments are not meant to be taken. They are meant to be received. Rex exhales slowly beside him, his breath steady and warm, filling the narrow opening with a presence that does not demand trust, but offers it freely. And the small figure inside responds not with words, but with a shift closer to the light. Just enough for Ethan to see more clearly now, the outline of a child, wrapped carefully in layers that have been arranged with intention, not carelessness, each fold placed as if someone once believed this hollow could protect rather than hide. "You are doing well," Ethan murmurs, voice low and even, the tone he once used in places where calm had to be built one word at a time. "Just stay with me. All right." The child does not answer, but the hand remains, fingers brushing lightly against Ethan's knuckles as if testing whether he will disappear like everything else has. Ethan keeps his hand still, open, allowing that fragile contact to settle into something steadier, and with his other hand he begins to widen the opening further, not breaking the tree apart, but easing it open, careful not to let splinters fall inward, careful not to disturb the space more than necessary. The bark gives way in thin layers, revealing more of the hollow, and with it, more of the child within, small shoulders rising and falling with each breath, eyes just visible now in the dim light, reflecting a mixture of caution and something else, something quieter, something that has not been entirely lost. Rex shifts slightly, lowering his head closer to the opening, and this time the child does not pull back, does not retreat into the shadows, but instead leans forward just enough for the dog's breath to reach their face. And there is a pause, a stillness that feels like recognition, not of who they are, but of what they are not. Not a threat, not a silence. Ethan notices it, the way the tension eases by the smallest degree, and he lets that moment breathe before speaking again. "We are going to get you out of there," he says gently, choosing each word with care, "but we are going to do it slowly, okay?" The child's fingers tighten slightly against his hand, not gripping, not clinging, just holding on enough to say they understand something, even if not everything. Ethan glances briefly around the hollow, taking in the details now that the light reaches further inside. The smooth edges, the deliberate shaping, the absence of rough splinters where there should have been many, and the thought returns, heavier now. This was made to hold someone, not by accident, not by nature, but by intention, and that understanding settles into him with a quiet weight he does not yet unpack. Rex lets out a soft, low sound, not a bark, not a whine, something in between, and the child responds with the faintest movement, turning slightly toward the sound as if drawn to it, as if it carries something familiar in a world that has been anything but. Ethan shifts his position carefully, bringing his shoulder closer to the opening, widening it just enough to allow space for the child to move without fear of getting stuck. And as he does, a small object catches his eye inside the hollow, tucked beside the child, partially hidden beneath the layers of fabric, something metallic, worn, reflecting a thin line of light. He does not reach for it. Not yet. Some things can wait. Right now, only one thing matters. "I am going to reach in now," he says softly, voice steady. "I will not rush you." The child does not pull away. That is enough. Slowly, carefully, Ethan slides his arm into the hollow, palm open, moving only as fast as the child allows. And when his hand finally rests against their shoulder, it is gentle, steady, grounding, the kind of touch that does not startle but reassures. The child exhales, a soft sound that carries more weight than any word, and leans just slightly into that contact, enough for Ethan to feel the shift, the beginning of trust forming in a place where it should have been impossible. Rex remains still, watchful, his presence unwavering, as if standing guard over something sacred rather than simply assisting in a rescue, and the bush around them stays quiet. the wind easing into a soft murmur that moves through the leaves without breaking the moment. Ethan adjusts his grip, supporting the child carefully, not lifting yet, just preparing, letting them feel the stability of his hold before anything changes. "We are going to move together," he murmurs, slow and steady. The child's hand releases his other hand, but only to reach slightly higher, resting lightly against his wrist, maintaining that connection in a new way, and Ethan understands, without needing explanation, that this is how it will be, step by step, moment by moment. No sudden movements, no broken trust. He begins to guide them forward, just a few centimeters at a time, easing them toward the opening. And as the light touches more of their face, more of their form, the reality of what has been hidden here becomes clearer, not in detail, not in explanation, but in presence, undeniable and quiet. Rex lifts his head slightly, eyes focused, tail still, every part of him aligned with the movement. And when the child's hand brushes briefly against his fur as they shift closer to the opening, the dog does not move away, does not react. He simply remains, steady and warm, offering something that words could never carry. Ethan keeps his voice low, consistent, guiding without pressure, and with each small movement, the distance between the hidden and the seen grows smaller, until at last the child is close enough to the opening that the outside world reaches them fully. Light, air, sound, all returning at once, gentle but undeniable. And in that moment, as their eyes adjust and their breath deepens, Ethan feels it again, that quiet shift, the one that does not announce itself but changes everything all the same. The moment where something lost begins, slowly, to find its way back. The moment the child's face meets the open air, something almost invisible passes through the space between them, a quiet release, like a breath that has been held far too long finally finding its way out. And Ethan feels it in the way the small body in his arms shifts, not pulling away, not retreating, but leaning just enough to accept what is happening, as if the outside world, with all its light and sound and movement, is both overwhelming and strangely familiar at the same time. He does not rush. He keeps one arm steady beneath the child, supporting without lifting fully, giving them time to adjust, because he knows that survival is not just about being found. It is about being able to stay once you are. Rex steps closer, slow and deliberate, his movements careful in a way that speaks of instinct shaped by something deeper than training. And when he lowers his head near the child's shoulder, he does not touch it first. He simply remains there, close enough for warmth, close enough for presence. The child notices. Ethan sees it in the slight turn of the head, in the way their eyes, still adjusting to the light, settle briefly on the dog, not with fear, not with uncertainty, but with a quiet, searching calm, as if recognizing something that does not need explanation. "That is Rex," Ethan says softly, his voice steady, grounded. "He is with us." The words are simple, but they carry weight, and Rex responds not with movement, but with stillness, holding that space as if he understands exactly what is being asked of him. The child's hand, small and unsteady, lifts slowly from where it had been resting against Ethan's wrist and reaches outward, not far, not quickly, just enough to close the distance between uncertainty and contact. And when their fingers brush against the thick fur along Rex's neck, the dog exhales, a slow, quiet sound that seems to anchor the moment in something real and safe. Ethan watches it happen, the shift, subtle but undeniable, the way tension loosens by degrees too small to measure, and he lets that guide him. "You are all right," he repeats gently, more for the rhythm of reassurance than for the meaning itself, and with that, he begins to lift, carefully, supporting the child fully now, easing them out of the hollow inch by inch, never forcing, always waiting for the slightest sign of hesitation before continuing. The light grows stronger around them as they emerge, the filtered gold of the afternoon sun slipping through the gum leaves, casting soft patterns across the ground. And the air feels different here, open, moving, carrying with it the faint scent of eucalyptus and warm earth that belongs to this place, not the contained stillness of the hollow. When the child is fully out, Ethan settles them gently against his chest, adjusting his hold so that they are secure but not confined, giving space even within safety. And for a moment, everything becomes quiet again, not because there is no sound, but because nothing needs to be said. Rex remains close, stepping in just enough that his presence forms a steady line beside them, not crowding, not intruding, simply there. Ethan lowers himself slowly onto one knee, bringing them closer to the ground, reducing the height, the distance, making the world feel less overwhelming. And as he does, the child's gaze shifts around the clearing, taking in shapes and light and movement, not with panic, but with a kind of cautious curiosity that feels like the beginning of something returning. "You are safe now," Ethan says, his tone unchanged, consistent, the kind of voice that builds trust not through volume, but through certainty. And though there is no verbal reply, the child's grip on his sleeve loosens slightly, not letting go, but no longer holding on as tightly. It is enough. Ethan glances briefly back at the hollow in the tree, now open, its hidden space revealed to the daylight, and something catches his eye again, that small metallic glint he noticed earlier, now more visible with the increased light. He shifts carefully, keeping one arm steady around the child as he leans just enough to reach inside with his free hand, his movements slow and deliberate so as not to disturb what has already been gained. His fingers close gently around the object, and he brings it out into the light, turning it slightly in his hand, and it reveals itself as something worn, something personal, a small tag, scratched but intact, the kind that carries identity in a way words alone cannot. He does not read it aloud. Not yet. Some things need time before they are spoken. Rex lifts his head slightly, watching the movement, then returns his attention to the child, as if that matters more than anything else in this moment. Ethan tucks the object carefully into his pocket, not hiding it, but holding it for later, and brings his focus back to what is in front of him. The wind moves again through the trees, softer now, carrying a gentle rustle through the leaves, and somewhere in the distance, a bird calls, tentative at first, then again, stronger, as if the world itself is beginning to resume around them. Ethan shifts his stance, preparing to stand, but he does not rush it. He lets the moment settle, lets the child feel the ground beneath them, the steadiness of his hold, the quiet presence of Rex at their side, and when he finally rises, it is smooth, controlled, bringing them with him into a world that is no longer hidden, no longer silent. And in that movement, simple as it is, something changes again, not dramatically, not loudly, but in a way that will carry forward from this place. Because sometimes rescue is not the moment you are found. It is the moment you realize you are no longer alone. And in the stillness of that clearing, beneath the wide Australian sky, that truth settles quietly into both of them, human and dog alike. The track back toward the service road is not far, less than a kilometer by Ethan's measure, but distance changes when it carries more than weight, when each step must account for someone else's balance, someone else's breath, and he adjusts without thinking, shortening his stride, placing each foot with quiet certainty so the movement remains steady and predictable. The child rests against him, not fully relaxed, not yet, but no longer rigid either, their breathing beginning to find a rhythm that matches his own, slow and even, and that alone tells him more than words ever could. Rex moves alongside them, slightly ahead at times, then drifting back, his pattern no longer frantic, but purposeful, scanning the path with that same quiet vigilance that had first brought them here, as if he understands that finding is only half of what matters. The bush begins to change as they move, the dense stillness of the hollow giving way to a more open stretch where sunlight reaches the ground in wider patches, warming the soil and lifting the scent of dry grass into the air, and with it comes sound again, distant at first, then closer, the low hum of insects, the faint call of a magpie somewhere beyond the trees, the world resuming its place around them as if it had only been waiting for permission. Ethan shifts his hold slightly, supporting the child more comfortably, careful not to startle, and after a few moments, he feels a small movement, the child adjusting on their own, not pulling away but settling in a way that suggests trust is beginning to root itself, fragile but real. "We are nearly there," he says softly, not because they need the information, but because words, when placed gently, can guide the mind as much as the body. The child does not respond, but their head turns slightly, eyes opening more fully now, taking in the shapes of the bush as they pass, the tall trunks, the shifting light, the movement of leaves overhead, and there is no panic in that gaze, only a careful awareness, like someone relearning the edges of the world one detail at a time. Rex pauses briefly ahead, nose lifting to the air, then continues, his tail low but steady, and Ethan notices the change in him too. The way the dog's urgency has softened into something more grounded, more watchful, as if the task has shifted from finding to protecting. The service road appears gradually through the trees, a narrow strip of packed earth cutting through the bush, marked by tire tracks that have dried into faint ridges, and beyond it, the parked vehicle sits where Ethan left it, quiet and waiting, its presence now part of a plan rather than an assumption. He slows as they approach, not out of hesitation, but to allow the transition to feel natural, not abrupt. And as his boots meet the firmer ground of the road, he pauses for a moment, letting the child take in the change, the open space, the absence of enclosing trees on either side. Rex steps closer, brushing lightly against Ethan's leg before moving to the other side, positioning himself near the child without crowding, maintaining that quiet line of presence that has guided them from the beginning. Ethan lowers himself slightly, not placing the child down yet, but easing the height again, allowing them to feel the ground through the shift in his posture. And he speaks once more, voice calm, consistent. "We are going to sit for a moment, all right." The child's hand, which had been resting lightly against his sleeve, tightens just a fraction, then loosens again, and Ethan takes that as agreement. He kneels slowly, bringing them closer to the earth, letting the moment settle before anything else changes, and for a few seconds, they remain there, the three of them, held in a quiet space between what has happened and what comes next. The wind moves across the road, carrying a soft warmth now, and the scent of eucalyptus drifts through again, stronger here, cleaner, and the child inhales it, a small but noticeable breath, deeper than before, as if recognizing something in it, something that belongs to life outside of the hollow. Ethan reaches into his pocket briefly, fingers brushing against the small tag he had retrieved, feeling its edges without taking it out, grounding himself in the knowledge that there is more to understand, more to uncover, but not yet, not here, not in this moment. Rex lowers himself to the ground beside them, front legs stretched forward, head lifted, eyes scanning the tree line, alert but calm, his presence forming a quiet boundary that does not need to be seen to be felt. Ethan shifts his weight again, preparing to stand, and this time, when he does, the movement feels different, not heavier, but more certain, as if the path ahead has already begun to take shape, even if its details remain unknown. He walks the remaining few meters to the vehicle, each step measured, each movement deliberate, and when he reaches the door, he pauses briefly, not because he needs to, but because he chooses to, giving the child one more moment to adjust, to settle, to understand that what comes next is not something to fear. "We are going to head somewhere safe," he says quietly, opening the door with one hand while keeping the other steady, "and you will not have to go back." The words are simple, but they carry a promise that he does not make lightly. Rex moves around to the other side, ready without being told, his movements smooth, practiced, and as Ethan gently guides the child into the seat, supporting them until they are secure, the world outside continues on, unchanged for anyone else. But for the three of them, something has shifted in a way that cannot be undone, a quiet crossing from hidden to seen, from silence to presence, from alone to found. The engine starts with a low, steady hum that settles into the air like something familiar, something predictable, and Ethan lets it idle for a moment before moving, not out of uncertainty, but because he understands that transitions matter, especially now, when every change could feel like too much if it comes too fast. The child sits quietly in the passenger seat, small hands resting against the fabric, fingers slightly curled as if still remembering the shape of the hollow, and their eyes move slowly across the interior of the vehicle, taking in details one at a time, the dashboard, the window, the light filtering through the glass, not overwhelmed, just careful. Rex settles himself on the floor behind them, his body angled forward, close enough to remain present, far enough to give space, and his gaze stays fixed on the child, not in a way that intrudes, but in the quiet way of something that has chosen to stay. Ethan reaches across gently, adjusting the seatbelt so it rests properly, his movements slow and deliberate, giving the child time to understand what he is doing. And when the belt clicks into place, the sound is soft, almost reassuring, a small marker of safety in a world that has been anything but. "We will take it easy," he says, voice calm, steady, no rush. The child does not answer, but their shoulders ease just slightly, and that is enough. Ethan places his hands on the wheel, glances once at the rearview mirror where Rex's reflection meets his eyes, and then he shifts the vehicle into motion, easing forward along the narrow road with a smooth, controlled pace that does not jolt or startle. The tires roll over the packed earth with a quiet crunch, and as they move, the bush begins to pass by in slow frames, tall trees sliding past the window, patches of sunlight flickering across the interior, the outside world returning not as something distant, but as something they are now moving through together. For a while, there is only the sound of the engine and the soft movement of air through the vents, and Ethan keeps his speed low, no more than 30 kilometers per hour, enough to make progress, not enough to overwhelm. He glances briefly toward the child, not staring, just checking, and he sees the change, subtle but real, the way their breathing has steadied, the way their gaze no longer flicks as quickly, the way their hands rest more naturally now, not gripping, not bracing, just there. Rex shifts once behind them, adjusting his position so his head rests lightly against the back of the seat, close enough that his presence can still be felt, and after a moment, the child's hand moves again, slow, tentative, reaching back just enough to find the edge of his fur, not fully turning, not fully reaching, but enough to connect. Rex does not move away. He simply stays, his breath slow and even, his warmth steady, and that small contact remains, quiet and unspoken, but meaningful in a way that words would only disturb. The road curves gently ahead, opening into a wider stretch where the trees thin and the sky becomes more visible, a pale blue expanse stretching above the bushland, and Ethan adjusts his grip slightly on the wheel, not tightening, just settling, his focus steady, his movements controlled. He has driven these roads before, knows the turns, the dips, the way the light changes in the late afternoon, but today it feels different, not because the road has changed, but because what he carries has. He reaches into his pocket briefly with one hand, careful, keeping the other steady on the wheel, and his fingers find the small tag again, tracing its worn edges, feeling the faint ridges of the markings pressed into its surface. And for a moment, he considers it, the weight of it, the story it might hold, but he does not take it out. Not yet. Some truths need the right moment to be seen. The child shifts slightly in the seat, not in discomfort, but in adjustment, turning their head just enough to look out the window, and Ethan notices the way their eyes follow the movement of the trees, the passing light, the shapes that come and go, and there is something in that gaze now that was not there before, not fear, not confusion, but curiosity, quiet and cautious, like something waking slowly after a long time in the dark. "You are doing well," Ethan says softly, not needing a response, just offering the words as a steady presence, and the child's fingers, still resting lightly against Rex's fur, curl just a fraction, then relax again, as if acknowledging the sound of his voice more than the meaning itself. The vehicle continues along the road, the distance between where they were and where they are going stretching behind them in quiet meters, each one marking a step away from the hollow, away from the silence, towards something that has not yet fully taken shape but already feels different. Rex closes his eyes for a moment, not in sleep, but in calm, his breathing slow, his body relaxed in a way that shows he no longer senses urgency, only presence, and Ethan lets that guide him as well, keeping his pace steady, his movements smooth, his focus clear. The bush opens further ahead, revealing the first signs of the main road beyond, a wider path that leads toward town, toward people, toward answers that will come in time. And as they approach it, Ethan slows slightly, not out of caution alone, but to allow the moment to settle once more, to give space for what has already changed to take root before anything new begins. He glances once more at the child, then at Rex, then back to the road. And in that quiet sequence, something aligns, not perfectly, not completely, but enough to move forward, because sometimes the path does not need to be fully known, it only needs to be taken, one steady step at a time. The main road stretches ahead in a long, quiet ribbon of bitumen, warm from the late afternoon sun, and as Ethan guides the vehicle onto it, the tires hum differently now, smoother, steadier, a sound that carries a sense of direction rather than uncertainty. The horizon opens wider here, the bush thinning into scattered lines of trees that cast long shadows across the roadside, and beyond them, distant paddocks roll out in soft gold and muted green, the kind of landscape that feels endless without being empty. Ethan eases the speed up slightly, no more than 50 kilometers per hour, enough to keep them moving forward without breaking the calm that has settled inside the car. The child remains quiet, but the silence is no longer heavy, no longer filled with tension. It is simply there, like a pause that does not need to be filled. Their gaze shifts between the passing scenery and the reflection in the window, as if trying to understand where they are now in relation to where they were, and every now and then, their hand moves slightly, fingers brushing against the seat, then returning to rest lightly against Rex's fur behind them. Rex stays close, his breathing slow and even, his body rising and falling with a rhythm that feels almost deliberate, like a steady anchor in motion. Ethan glances toward the rearview mirror again, catching the reflection of the dog's eyes, calm, alert, and something unspoken passes between them, a quiet understanding that what needed to be done has been done, and what comes next will require the same patience. The road curves gently to the left, leading them toward a small cluster of buildings in the distance, not quite town, not quite empty land, just a place where people exist in the space between, and Ethan shifts his grip on the wheel slightly, adjusting his posture as the light begins to soften, the sun lowering just enough to cast everything in a warmer tone. He reaches into his pocket again, this time more slowly, drawing out the small metal tag and holding it loosely in his fingers, turning it just enough for the fading light to catch its surface. The markings are worn but still visible, edges softened by time, letters pressed into metal with a purpose that feels personal, and for a moment, he studies it without reading it aloud, letting its presence speak quietly in his hand. The child notices. Their eyes drift from the window to the object, not with alarm, not with urgency, but with a subtle focus that suggests recognition without full understanding. And Ethan sees it, the slight stillness, the way their breathing pauses just for a second before returning to normal. He does not rush to show it. He does not ask questions. Instead, he lowers his hand slightly, bringing the tag into clearer view without making it the center of attention, allowing the moment to unfold naturally, without pressure. "We will figure it out," he says softly, not as a question, not as a promise that demands belief, but as a steady statement that sits gently in the space between them. The child's gaze lingers on the tag for a moment longer, then shifts back to the window. But something has changed, something small but noticeable, like a thread connecting what was hidden to what is now seen. The vehicle continues forward, passing a roadside fence that stretches alongside the road for several hundred meters, its wire catching the light in thin, bright lines, and beyond it, a few cattle stand scattered across the paddock, unmoving, watching the world pass in their quiet way. The air inside the vehicle feels different now, not just safe, but settled, as if the movement itself has become part of the healing, each kilometer creating distance not just in space, but in experience. Rex shifts slightly again, adjusting his position so that his head rests more comfortably against the back of the seat, closer to the child's shoulder, and this time, the child leans back just enough for that contact to remain, not leaning away, not stiffening, just allowing it to be. Ethan notices it without looking directly, the kind of awareness that comes from paying attention to what is not said, and he lets that guide him as he continues to drive, his movements smooth, his focus steady. The cluster of buildings grows closer now, revealing itself as a small roadside station, a place where travelers stop briefly before continuing on, and Ethan slows slightly as they approach, not because he needs to stop, but because he is considering what comes next, weighing options without urgency. The child turns their heads slightly toward the front now, eyes moving across the shapes of the buildings, the parked vehicles, the small signs that mark the place as part of the world beyond the bush. And there is no fear in that gaze, only quiet observation, as if they are taking in each detail and placing it somewhere within themselves. Ethan keeps his voice low when he speaks again, not breaking the calm, just adding to it. We are nearly there, he says, though the destination is not just a place. It is a shift, a continuation of what has already begun. The sun dips a little lower, casting longer shadows across the road, and the light inside the vehicle softens further, wrapping everything in a gentle warmth that feels almost deliberate, as if the day itself is easing them forward, one steady moment at a time. And in that quiet progression, the distance between what was hidden and what is now becoming understood continues to grow, not in leaps, but in careful, patient steps that hold meaning far beyond the road they travel. The vehicle rolls to a gentle stop near the edge of the roadside station, gravel crunching softly beneath the tires, and Ethan lets the engine idle for a few seconds longer than necessary, not out of distraction, but because he understands that arriving is its own kind of moment, one that should not be rushed or broken too quickly. The place is quiet, only a few vehicles parked beneath the fading light, their surfaces reflecting the last stretch of afternoon sun, and beyond them, a small building stands with its windows catching the glow, a soft hum of distant activity barely reaching the car. Ethan rests his hands loosely on the wheel, then slowly turns the engine off, and with that, a deeper silence settles inside the vehicle, one that is no longer filled with tension, but with something steadier, something grounded. The child remains still for a moment, feeling the shift, the absence of movement, the quiet that follows, and their eyes move slowly toward the window, taking in the new space outside, not with hesitation, but with a quiet awareness that feels more present than before. Rex lifts his head slightly behind them, ears adjusting to the new sounds. Faint voices carried on the air, the soft clink of something metallic in the distance, and then he settles again, calm, watchful, his presence unchanged. Ethan reaches for the door handle but pauses, just for a second, turning his head slightly toward the child, not fully, just enough to bring his voice into their space without overwhelming it. "We will step out together," he says softly, tone even, measured, no rush. The child's fingers shift lightly against the seat, then still, and after a moment, they nod, a small movement, but clear enough. Ethan opens the door slowly, letting the outside air move in first, warm and dry, carrying the scent of dust and fuel and something faintly sweet from nearby gum trees. And he waits, giving the child time to adjust to the change before moving further. Rex shifts behind them, preparing without instruction, his movements smooth and quiet, and as Ethan steps out, he circles gently to the other side of the vehicle, not hurried, not tense, just steady. When he opens the passenger door, the light spills in softly, touching the child's face, and for a moment, they blink, adjusting, not recoiling, just taking it in, one layer at a time. Ethan offers his hand again, open, steady, the same way he had at the tree, and this time, the child does not hesitate as long. Their hand reaches out, small but sure, and rests against his. And in that contact, there is less uncertainty now, less testing, more acceptance. He helps them out carefully, guiding their movement without lifting, letting them feel the ground beneath their feet, letting them stand on their own for that first moment. And when they do, there is a slight sway, not from weakness, but from the unfamiliarity of space after confinement. Rex steps closer immediately, positioning himself just beside them, not touching, but near enough that his presence forms a quiet line of support, and the child glances down briefly, noticing him, and then steadies. Ethan does not let go of their hand right away. He gives them time to settle, to feel the weight of standing, the openness of the air, the reality of being here, not hidden, not confined, just present. Around them, the station continues its quiet rhythm, a car, door closing somewhere in the distance, the faint murmur of voices near the building. But nothing approaches, nothing intrudes, and for now, that space remains theirs. Ethan takes a slow breath, then reaches into his pocket once more, drawing out the small metal tag, and this time, he holds it a little higher, not presenting it, not demanding attention, but allowing it to exist within the shared space between them. The child notices again. Their gaze settles on it, longer this time, more focused, and something in their expression shifts, subtle but unmistakable, a flicker of recognition that does not fully form into understanding, but is enough to mark a connection. Ethan watches carefully, not speaking, allowing the moment to unfold without pressure, and after a few seconds, he turns the tag slightly so the light catches it more clearly, revealing the worn letters etched into its surface. He still does not read them aloud. Instead, he lowers his hand slightly, bringing it closer, offering the child the chance to see it more clearly if they choose. The child's fingers lift slowly, hovering just above the metal, not touching it first, then brushing lightly against it, as if confirming that it is real, that it belongs to this moment, and not to the place they came from. Rex remains still beside them, his presence unwavering, his attention fixed not on the object, but on the child, as if understanding that what matters here is not the thing itself, but what it carries. Ethan finally speaks, his voice quiet, grounded. "This was with you," he says gently, not asking, not assuming, just stating what is known, and the child's hand lingers on the tag for a moment longer before lowering slowly, their eyes lifting to meet his briefly, not fully, not with complete openness, but enough to show that something has shifted again, something small but real. The air moves around them, carrying the soft warmth of the fading day, and the light begins to soften further, stretching shadows across the ground. And in that quiet space between what has been found and what is yet to be understood, Ethan feels it clearly now, the weight of what this moment holds, not just as an event, but as a beginning, one that does not need to be forced or rushed, only carried forward with the same steady care that brought them here in the first place. The moment stretches quietly between them, held not by urgency, but by something far more deliberate, a shared understanding that does not need to be spoken aloud, and Ethan lowers his hand slowly, letting the metal tag rest back against his palm before slipping it gently into his pocket again, not hiding it, just placing it somewhere safe until its meaning finds the right time to be heard. The child remains still for a few seconds longer, eyes drifting from where the tag had been to the ground beneath their feet, as if grounding themselves in something real, something solid, and Ethan notices the way their shoulders settle, not completely, but enough to show that the weight they carried before is no longer pressing in the same way. Rex shifts slightly closer, his body angled, just enough that his presence remains constant, a quiet line beside them, and when the child's hand moves again, it does not reach for Ethan this time, but for the dog, fingers brushing lightly against his fur with a familiarity that is beginning to form on its own, without guidance. Rex exhales softly, leaning just enough into the touch to acknowledge it, and then stills again, his calm unwavering. Ethan lets the moment breathe before speaking, his voice low, steady, carrying the same quiet assurance that has guided every step so far. "We will head inside," he says, not as a command, but as a gentle direction. "There is water, a place to sit, somewhere quieter." The child looks toward the building, eyes narrowing slightly as they take in the distance, the shapes, the movement of people near the entrance, and for a brief moment, there is hesitation, not fear, but uncertainty, the kind that comes when stepping into something unknown after being hidden for so long. Ethan notices it immediately. He does not pull. He does not rush. Instead, he shifts his stance slightly, lowering his height just a fraction, bringing himself closer to their level without breaking the calm. "We will go slow," he adds softly, and the child's gaze returns to him, holding there for a second longer than before, as if measuring the truth in his words, before giving the smallest nod. It is enough. They begin to walk, not quickly, not with purpose that pushes forward, but with a steady pace that allows each step to feel certain, and the gravel beneath their feet crunches lightly with each movement, a simple, grounding sound that marks their progress in small, clear moments. Rex moves alongside them, never ahead, never behind, just there, his presence constant, his attention quiet but complete. The distance to the building is not far, perhaps 20 meters, but it unfolds slowly, each step carrying its own weight, its own meaning. And as they approach, the sounds become clearer, the soft murmur of conversation, the faint hum of a refrigerator unit inside, the distant clink of something being set down on a counter. The door stands open, inviting but not imposing, and Ethan pauses just before reaching it, giving the child one more moment to take in the threshold, the shift from outside to inside, from open air to enclosed space. "Right here," he says gently, And when they step forward together, the change in atmosphere is immediate, cooler air brushing against their skin, the scent of coffee and clean surfaces replacing the dry warmth of the bush, and the light inside, softer, more contained, settles around them without harshness. A person behind the counter glances up briefly, noticing them, but does not approach immediately, sensing perhaps that this moment requires space rather than interruption, and Ethan gives a small nod in return, an unspoken acknowledgement that things will be handled in time. He guides the child toward a nearby seat, not far from the entrance, where the outside light still reaches in, and lowers himself slightly as they sit, ensuring they are comfortable before stepping back even a fraction. Rex settles beside them almost instantly, lying down with a quiet ease that fills the space with calm, his body forming that same steady presence as before, unchanged by the new surroundings. The child's gaze moves around the room slowly, taking in the shapes, the quiet movement of people, the gentle hum of the place, and there is no panic, no withdrawal, only a careful observation that suggests they are beginning to understand that this world, too, can be navigated. Ethan remains close, not hovering, not distant, just present, his posture relaxed but attentive, and after a moment, he reaches for a glass of water placed on a nearby table, offering it slowly, allowing the child to take it at their own pace. When they do, their hands steady enough to hold it, to bring it closer, to take a small sip, Ethan feels the shift again, subtle but real, another step, another piece of something returning to where it belongs. Rex watches quietly, his eyes soft, his breathing even, and in that stillness, the space around them settles into something that no longer feels uncertain, no longer feels fragile, but instead begins to carry the quiet weight of safety, the kind that does not need to be declared, only felt. And as Ethan sits there beside them, listening to the soft sounds of the room, watching the child take in this new place one careful moment at a time, he understands that what started as a signal in the bush has become something else entirely, something that will not end here, but will continue, step by steady step, into whatever comes next. Time moves differently inside the small roadside station, slower somehow, as if the world outside continues forward while this space holds its breath just long enough for something fragile to settle, and Ethan remains seated nearby, not too close, not too far, his presence steady without pressing, the kind of distance that allows trust to grow without being forced. The child finishes another small sip of water, their hands more stable now, the slight tremor that lingered before easing into something steadier, and when they lower the glass, they do not set it down immediately, they hold it for a moment, fingers wrapped around it, as if the simple act of holding something warm and real matters more than the water itself. Rex shifts slightly on the floor, adjusting his position so that his body aligns more comfortably beside the chair, and when the child's hand lowers absent-mindedly, it brushes against the top of his head, resting there without hesitation, without testing, just a quiet connection that no longer feels new. The dog closes his eyes briefly, not sleeping, just settling deeper into that calm presence he has carried from the beginning, and Ethan notices the change, the way the contact is no longer tentative but natural, the way the space between fear and comfort has narrowed into something manageable. A soft sound from the counter draws Ethan's attention for a moment, a kettle being set down, the low murmur of a voice asking something simple, and he responds with a small nod without leaving his seat, keeping the focus where it belongs, because some moments do not need interruption, they only need time. The child's gaze lifts again, moving slowly around the room, not scanning for escape, not searching for danger, just observing, taking in details with a quiet curiosity that grows stronger with each passing second, and when their eyes settle briefly on Ethan, there is something there now that was not present before, not full trust, not yet, but recognition, the understanding that he is part of what has changed. Ethan meets that look without holding it too long, offering a small, calm nod, nothing more, just enough to acknowledge it without overwhelming it. And then he lets his gaze drift slightly, giving the child space to return to their own pace. He reaches into his pocket again, this time slower than before, and draws out the metal tag once more, holding it in his hand where the light from the window can touch it, revealing the faint details etched into its surface, worn but still present, and for a moment, He studies it quietly, not as an object, but as a piece of something larger, something that connects this moment to another place, another time. The child notices again. Their eyes shift toward the tag, lingering longer now, and there is a change in their expression, subtle but deeper than before, a flicker of something like memory trying to surface, not fully formed, not clear, but there, just beneath the surface. Ethan does not speak immediately. He lets the silence hold, lets the weight of the moment settle naturally, and then, in a voice that remains soft and steady, he says, "It has a name on it." He does not read it yet. He simply offers the truth as it is, without pressure, without expectation. The child's fingers tighten slightly around the glass, then loosen, and after a moment, their free hand lifts slowly, reaching toward the tag again, this time with less hesitation, and when their fingers touch it, they linger there, tracing the edges, the faint grooves of the letters, as if trying to feel something beyond the surface. Rex lifts his head slightly, watching the movement, then settles again, his presence unchanged, steady as ever. Ethan watches quietly, not interrupting, not guiding, just allowing the connection to form on its own, because some things cannot be explained, they have to be remembered. The child's hand pauses on the tag, then withdraws slowly, resting back in their lap, and their eyes lift once more, meeting Ethan's again, this time holding the contact a fraction longer, and in that brief moment, something passes between them, not a question, not an answer, but an understanding that they are both standing at the edge of something that will take time to unfold. Ethan nods slightly, not as confirmation, but as acknowledgement, and then he finally lowers his gaze to the tag again, turning it gently so the light catches the letters more clearly, and in a voice that remains calm, grounded, he begins to read it, not loudly, not with emphasis, just enough for the words to exist in the space between them, because sometimes hearing something aloud is the first step toward bringing it back into the world. The sound of the name settles into the room, quiet but undeniable, and the child's breath catches for the briefest moment, a pause so small it could be missed if not for the way Ethan has learned to notice these things, and then it releases again, steady, controlled, as if the weight of it is being accepted slowly, piece by piece. Outside, the light continues to fade, the sky shifting into softer tones, and inside, the quiet remains, not empty, not uncertain, but filled with something that feels like the beginning of understanding, the kind that does not arrive all at once, but builds gently, one moment at a time, until it becomes something solid enough to stand on. The name lingers in the air long after the sound of it fades, not loud, not heavy, but present in a way that settles into the space between them, and Ethan does not repeat it, does not press it further, he simply lets it exist, allowing the moment to shape itself without interference. The child remains still, eyes lowered for a second before lifting again, not searching this time, but holding, as if something inside has shifted just enough to make room for what was spoken. Their breathing changes slightly, not faster, not uneven, but deeper, as though a part of them that had been closed has begun, carefully, to open. Rex senses it before anything else changes. He lifts his head slowly, ears tilting forward, not in alertness, but in quiet attention, and then he leans just slightly closer, resting the side of his head gently against the child's knee, a simple gesture that carries more reassurance than any words could offer. The child does not pull away. Instead, their hand lowers again, this time without hesitation, resting fully on Rex's fur, fingers spreading slightly, as if grounding themselves in something warm and real. Ethan watches the connection form, not with surprise, but with recognition, because he has seen this before, in different places, different times, the way trust often finds its way through silence first, through presence, through something that does not ask to be understood, only felt. He leans back slightly in his seat, giving the moment space, his posture relaxed but attentive, and for a while, nothing needs to be said. The sounds of the station continue softly around them, a chair shifting somewhere, the low hum of a refrigerator, a distant voice speaking in quiet tones, but none of it intrudes, none of it breaks the stillness that has settled here. The child's gaze moves again, not as quickly as before, but with more intention, taking in the room, the light, the small movements of people in the background, and there is no fear in it now, only a careful awareness that feels steadier, more anchored. Ethan reaches for the glass again, not to take it away, but to refill it, moving slowly, deliberately. And when he places it back within reach, he does so without drawing attention to the act, allowing it to be just another quiet offering rather than a gesture that demands notice. The child sees it anyway. Their fingers move toward it, lifting it with more confidence than before, taking another sip, and this time, when they lower the glass, they set it down on their own, carefully, placing it on the table as if marking a small but meaningful step. Rex remains where he is, his breathing steady, his presence unchanged, and when the child's hand rests again against him, it lingers there, no longer testing, no longer tentative, just there, as if it has found a place it understands. Ethan lets his gaze drift briefly toward the window, where the light has softened into the early evening glow, the sky outside shifting into warmer tones, and he knows that time is moving, that there will be questions, steps, people who will need to be involved, but none of that feels immediate. None of that needs to happen before this moment has fully settled. He brings his attention back slowly, his voice quiet when he speaks again, not breaking the calm, only adding to it. "You are safe here," he says, not as reassurance that needs to be proven, but as a simple truth that exists now. The child looks at him again, longer this time, their eyes holding his without turning away, and there is something different in that look, something clearer, not fully open, not fully understood, but no longer guarded in the same way. It is enough. Ethan nods slightly, acknowledging it, then lets the silence return, because he understands that trust does not grow through constant words, it grows in the spaces between them. Outside, a car passes slowly along the road, its sound fading as quickly as it came, and inside, the air remains still, calm, carrying the quiet weight of what has changed. The metal tag rests unseen in his pocket, its meaning no longer